The jailhouse gates rumble down as a prison van carries John Gotti to a future behind bars. Prosecutors say bon voyage, goodbye to John Gotti, who's headed now for the prison yard.
The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck.
Good evening, I'm Bill Butel, and John Gotti knows it all too well tonight. After a 6-year crusade to bring him down, the government's case stuck to him like glue. Tonight, John Gotti stands convicted, found guilty on every count against him. And the top dog in the country's most powerful crime family can only look at the moon through jailhouse bars. He was guilty of the murder of Paul Castellano, of the murder of Robert DiBernardo, guilty, of the murder of Louis Melito, guilty, and of the murder of Louis DeBono, guilty. It's a litany that could mean life in prison for John Gotti, and Jim Dolan has been in Brooklyn federal court ever since the trial began 7.5 weeks ago. Jim?
Bill, 12 courageous New Yorkers today put away their fears and waded through the confusion and decided in the end that John Gotti was telling the truth. On the secretly recorded audio tapes played at the trial, Gotti himself boasted that he was the boss of the Gambino crime family. Gotti himself bragged that he ordered several murders. The jury decided to take him at his word. The prosecution team that put John Gotti behind bars for the rest of his life had plenty to celebrate. In a high-stakes gamble that pitted the integrity of the nation's judicial system against organized crime, the Justice Department came up aces.
If John Gotti was acquitted, I thought it would give a shot in the arm to organized crime throughout the United States, and John Gotti would achieve a status that not even Al Capone or others in the past have achieved. I was convinced if John Gotti was convicted, it would be the death knell for organized crime.
And U.S. Attorney Andrew Maloney, who watched Gotti walk out of a federal courtroom 5 years ago, savored the victory.
I was determined to bring John Gotti to justice, yes, 5 years ago when he walked out of this courthouse. Fortunately, I'm still around to see it happen.
Inside the packed, hushed courtroom, John Gotti sat with a wise guy grin as the jury returned with its verdict. He stared at the jury as he had stared at the witnesses who testified against him, daring them to continue. But as the enormity of his defeat became apparent as guilty verdict after guilty verdict was read by the jury forewoman, the facade never cracked. He mumbled some, told someone else to shut up, but he smiled throughout. And after the jury was polled, he was swept away by federal marshals.
We were hurt and stunned by the verdict, and our support came from John Gotti and Frank LoCascio.
It all started right here, a blood-soaked street on the east side where former Gambino godfather Paul Castellano was gunned down on Gotti's order in a brazen storm of gunfire in December of 1985. Gotti would climb over the body of Paul Castellano to ascend the throne of the nation's most powerful crime family. Murder would become his favorite tool, the way he attained power and the way he maintained control. And for a while, he managed to avoid the law. But in the end, he made two crucial mistakes.
These guys weren't arrested. I got him.
One of his mistakes was naming this man as his underboss. Sammy the Bull Gravano was Gotti's most trusted friend, a man who had helped kill Castellano and had killed several others on Gotti's orders. But in a move that shook the underworld and shocked the FBI, Gravano turned state's evidence and in exchange for a lighter sentence for himself, testified against his former boss. Gravano, the highest-ranking mobster to ever sing for the government, provided the trial with its highest drama. For 9 days he sat on the witness stand, the boss and the rat, 20 feet apart, staring threateningly at one another across the courtroom. Two men accustomed to settling their differences with gunfire, forced to keep their trigger fingers in their pockets. Gravano admitted to 19 murders and a lifetime of crime, but despite all that baggage, his testimony about John Gotti sounded suspiciously like the truth.
If one can infer anything, and you can speculate as easy as I, it's obviously they believed everything Sam Gravano had to say.
Gotti's other mistake was not keeping his mouth shut. Yes, the jury believed Sam Gravano, but hearing Gotti on the secretly recorded audio tapes order murders and brag about murders he'd ordered in the past and complain that murders he'd ordered had not yet been committed was all more than this courageous jury could ignore. And they decided to end the murderous reign of the man who said he wanted everything run a Cosa Nostra way.
The defendants and their attorneys kept saying they have total faith in the jury system. Well, the jury has spoken, and we're very gratified.
Gotti co-defendant Frank LoCascio was also convicted of everything he was charged with except one gambling count. Sentencing will be held for both men June 23rd, but it won't be very exciting. Federal guidelines virtually forced the judge to put John Gotti away as his lawyer said during the trial, until he's carried out of jail in a box. Bill?
And you won't have to go down to that courtroom for a while.
That's right.
It's nice to have you back from the underworld. Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you.
One of Gotti's old stomping grounds was the Ravenite Social Club in Little Italy, where the feds secretly taped conversations. So today, some jokester put a sign on the Ravenite door. It read, "For rent, call 1-800-FED-CORE," meaning Federal Corrections. And it made one of the club patrons so angry he tore it down. On Mulberry Street, loyalty to the Don is strong.
They wanted him at any cost, and they got him at any cost. He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
So Gotti may be convicted, but to some people he is still beloved. To some people he is still the Teflon Don.
John Gotti's neighborhood is a special place. He's the most well-known man in the neighborhood and a sort of guardian of the place. The Don's home turf is Howard Beach, Queens, an ordinary neighborhood that is pretty extraordinary because that's where John Gotti lives. Tappy Phillips is live there in Howard Beach. Tappy?
And Bill, John Gotti Jr. walked into this house just a few minutes ago, accompanied by a bodyguard, but he and the rest of the family are keeping to themselves tonight. Other family members have come in and out of John Gotti's house here in Howard Beach tonight, but they're being very tight-lipped about today's verdict. John Gotti's daughter, Vicky, wearing a mink coat, ran from the house to a waiting car tonight. She had nothing to say about her father's conviction on charges of murder and racketeering, but earlier a family friend expressed their sentiments. Stink. There was an old yellow ribbon on a tree in front of the Gotti house tonight for the celebration that never was. Some neighbors didn't want to talk, but others were willing to defend their friend, the Don.
He got railroad.
Why do you say that?
I'm living in this neighborhood 22 years. I don't think he got his rights. I don't think so.
No, I'm not surprised. They did what they had to do, and feel bad for the guy.
All I know is he's a good guy. Shouldn't have happened.
So it is quiet here tonight, no celebration, no fireworks as there had been following previous not guilty verdicts. This verdict has at least temporarily silenced the Gottis and the mob. We're live in Howard Beach, Queens. Tappy Phillips, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Can you imagine being on that Gotti jury? You're supposed to decide the fate of a man whose very name terrifies anyone who's afraid of the mob. Well, tonight we have an exclusive interview with a man who had to judge Gotti in a previous case and is not afraid to talk about it.
They look through your mail, they monitor your phone calls, when you're allowed phone calls.
Life in the eye of a storm. Life as a Gotti juror. Richard Selensky was one of 12 jurors to find John Gotti innocent of conspiracy and assault in the February 1990 trial, an acquittal that secured until today Gotti's reputation as the Teflon Don. But he also has a reputation as the nation's most notorious mobster. It might have given others cause for concern, but it never frightened this quiet Manhattan resident.
He's meticulous, he's gorgeously groomed, he's well-dressed. And this is what you see. You're hearing other things that say he does this, he does that, but you're looking at the man, he's not threatening to you.
Selensky says from what he's seen, there were some big differences between the government's case now and then.
On the tapes of our trial, he's never talking about criminal activities, never. Also, the quality was extremely poor. You really had to listen, and without transcripts, you would be lost. But as the judge said, it's what you hear, it's not what you read.
And Selensky says that the current Gotti jury shouldn't be afraid of retribution from the mob because he thinks the mob realizes that retribution is not good for business.
Tonight, with all but one alleged head of a crime family behind bars, organized crime would seem to be in chaos. In addition to John Gotti, who was convicted today, Victor Orena, said to be the acting boss of the Colombo family, was arrested yesterday. He now faces murder charges. Carmine Persico, said to be the head of the Colombo family, has been in jail since last summer for a failed assassination attempt on Orena. And Vittorio Amuzzo of the Lucchesi family is in jail awaiting trial on 9 murder charges. Still on the street is Vincent Giganti of the Genovese family, but he's awaiting trial on charges of racketeering. With John Gotti and the other leaders in prison, what happens to the mob? They can't run their families from prison cells forever. And very often there's a mob war as men fight to become the new Don, the new boss of bosses. Is a mob war in the cards now? Tim Minton reports.
With its head decapitated in court, the body and soul of the Gambino family's up for grabs. And like Gotti, the next boss could be elected with bullets.
When the organization is breaking down, as it is right now, there will be less peaceable resolution of problems and more random violence.
That's what happened last year in a struggle for the Colombo family. Henry Hank the Bank Smurra was an early victim after reportedly botching a hit on boss Victor Arena. Several more bloody bodies also hit the street in retaliation before the government finally got Arena indicted just yesterday.
It's hard to say at this point who's going to become the most powerful figure in the five families in New York and throughout the country. I think at this point most people are running for cover.
According to law enforcement sources, among those in the running for the top crime job are Joe Butch Correa, a reputed Gambino boss who's facing his own racketeering indictment. Nicky Carrazzo's another possibility. He beat the rap with the then Teflon Don 5 years ago. And there's reputed Gambino capo John Gotti Jr., if he lives long enough.
Whatever power he had was derivative from his father. With his father having lost it, he has problems.
Whoever the next Don is, he may have to scale back the family business. For one thing, there's increased risk of business reversals due to rats like Sammy Gravano. And there's law enforcement on a roll looking for a new target. Tim Minton, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
And some footnotes on our Gotti coverage tonight. The boss will find out just how bad life will be for him when he is sentenced June 23rd. And the indications tonight are that Gotti will be bunking with the worst of the worst at the Marion Federal Penitentiary in Illinois. And effective tonight, the Dapper Don is no more. He has had to trade in his designer suits for orange cotton.
This time, the charges stick, and the Teflon Don may now spend the rest of his life in prison. John Gotti, guilty on all counts, will have team coverage, including Barry Cunningham at the courthouse when the verdict came down. Ed Miller with live reaction from Gotti's Howard Beach neighborhood. Dave Browdy talks with experts on what it means to organize crime. And Jason Carroll with a look back at the 7-week trial and what comes next.
And now, Heidi Tom, Marvin Scott, Jerry Gerard with sports, and Bob Harris with the weather. This is the Channel 11 News at 10.
Good evening. It's a guilty verdict that prosecutors hope breaks the back of organized crime in New York City.
Gambino crime boss John Gotti and his co-defendant Frank Locasio guilty on a host of felonies that could send them to prison for the rest of their lives. Barry Cunningham was at the Brooklyn Federal Court when the verdict came in.
A supremely confident John Gotti had spent most of his 7 weeks on trial thumbing his nose at the prosecutor, muttering obscenities against the government, and laughing off testimony that he is the godfather of the nation's richest and most murderous crime family. It took only a day and a half of deliberations for the anonymous, sequestered jury to wipe the smile off Gotti's face. Tough guy Gotti took it on the chin over and over and over again as the jury forewoman repeatedly pronounced him guilty of murdering his way to the top of the Gambino crime syndicate. In the spectator benches, several well-dressed members of the Gambino gang cursed the jury out loud as the clerk recorded guilty verdicts on all 13 counts of murder, conspiracy to murder, racketeering, illegal gambling, loan sharking, obstruction of justice, and tax fraud. Gotti's underboss in the Gambino mob, Frank Locasio, was also convicted of murder and racketeering, acquitted only on a single count of illegal gambling. They've called Gotti the Teflon Don because the government has been unable to make the charges stick against him in 3 previous trials.
The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck.
It's been a long road. Justice has been served, and it feels awfully good.
The government maintained that the best evidence against John Gotti was his own voice, secretly recorded on FBI surveillance tapes.
You come as I'm with John Gotti. You're setting your mother head off. You know better than to get there.
Gotti was heard discussing the daily business of the Cosa Nostra, everything from gangland rubouts and labor racketeering payoffs to his own recipe for cooking pasta with lentils.
If John Gotti was acquitted, I thought it would give a shot in the arm to organized crime throughout the United States, and John Gotti would achieve a status that not even Al Capone or others in the past have achieved. I was convinced if John Gotti was convicted, it would be the death knell for organized crime, traditional organized crime as we know it in the United States, and I think that's what happened. I'm not going to say it's going to be gone in a year, but the mob, as we have known it, in New York City and in the United States is on the way out.
Gotti's lawyers were stunned by the swiftness of the verdict, which could put Gotti in prison for life with no parole.
He took it like a real man, and he has vowed that the fight is not over, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not, I warrant you.
Just as surprising as the swiftness of the guilty verdict was how completely the jury believed the government's star witness, Mafia turncoat Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, John Gotti's best friend and betrayer. The bad news for organized crime in America is that Gravano is now set to testify against other gangland leaders in other cities. In the words of the federal prosecutor, they're next. At the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse, Barry Cunningham, Channel 11, News at 10.
Well, prosecutors call the verdict a victory for justice, but there's a very different opinion on the streets of Howard Beach. Ed Miller is standing by now in John Gotti's neighborhood. Ed?
Heidi, the curious carnival continues tonight outside the Gotti family household. People from all over driving by, trying to get a close-up look at where the Dapper Don used to hang all his expensive gabardine suits and silk ties. On the front lawn, in the middle of a tree, hangs a single yellow ribbon, symbolizing the hopeful return of the family patriarch. For up until today, many neighbors and family members truly believed that John Gotti would soon be coming home. John Gotti's daughter Victoria, clearly upset, covering her face, dashing out of the family house tonight, refusing to talk. But earlier, right after the verdict was announced, she wondered out loud whether anyone believed the government won fair and square, accusing the prosecution of overstepping its boundaries. Many others in Howard Beach tonight agree.
I don't know. I don't like it at all. I think he should have gotten off.
There'll be an appeal and he'll get off because it was very unfair. I think this government sucks. That's all set up. He wasn't guilty. You know, he's just trying to make a living like everybody else.
You know, I think they pulled a lot of dirty tricks. And I don't believe their witness.
All the jurors said he was guilty unanimously, beyond the shadow of a doubt. I guess he was.
I think he got what he deserved.
Really?
Yeah.
I agree. If all these things that they say about him are true, what the government says about him are true, then he probably does deserve to go to jail. But it's just, I just never really felt that he was really like that.
This government's no good. Should be out. He's a good guy. He does a lot for the community, you know. Put him away for nothing.
After initially showing some signs of wanting to speak out about what happened today, the family has now gone into hiding. It is not clear at this hour exactly where John Gotti Jr. is, or for that matter, where Mrs. Gotti is. Reporting live in Howard Beach, I'm Ed Miller. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Ed. The heads of 4 of New York's 5 crime families are all either in prison or awaiting trial right now. And with John Gotti facing a possible life sentence, the question arises now, who's in charge? Dave Browdy is standing by now with a look behind the scenes. Dave?
Well, Marvin, the man convicted of being the head of the Gambino crime family will undoubtedly appeal his verdict. But tonight, veteran law enforcement officials are saying they see no reversible error in the trial that ended today with the guilty verdict. They say the Teflon Don has lost his protective coating, and in fact, he's been losing it for quite a while. The event that led to John Gotti's conviction, ironically, was the same one prosecutors say brought him to power, the killing of former mafia boss of all bosses, Paul Castellano. Now they say not only is Gotti in danger of losing his job as head of the Gambino family, his son Junior, the reputed acting boss, is believed in danger of losing his life.
I think Junior Gotti, who's really a Neanderthal, I mean, he was never an entity at all. Just because of his father, he was put in that position. This kid is a zero, a complete zero. As I pointed out earlier, he should be looking over his shoulder from now on.
Former federal prosecutor Rudolph Giuliani hailed the conviction and said he couldn't imagine a judge in the Court of Appeals wanting to reverse the jury's quick verdict.
This was a case in which it would have been inconceivable that a jury wouldn't convict him. There was every form of evidence imaginable, and then some. So this was a case beyond any doubt.
But veteran criminal defense lawyer Barry Slapnick, who once defended Gotti, says there was reversible error, more than enough to force a new trial.
The main issue of the Gotti case originally was, how could you take a man's lawyer away from him? The second issue then became, how do you take his defense away from him? This has now become a collage or a mosaic of unjust acts. I think the Second Circuit will deal with this thing appropriately.
Bruce Cutler, Gotti's attorney of choice, is out of town at another trial. He released a statement calling this trial a railroad job from the get-go. The government, he said, didn't want a fair fight because they knew they couldn't win. The appeal, he said, will be a fight that the government will have second to none. But while the legal battles over John Gotti's fate continue, the Gambino family he's convicted of running is said to be in flux. The question, who will be the next to take the mafia leadership?
If I had to pick somebody to run that family, it'd be Jimmy Fiala. But on the other hand, if I was Jimmy Fiala, I wouldn't want that family, because once you put yourself in that position of leadership, the scrutiny of the government and the media comes down on you like a ton of bricks.
There are several other mob indictments believed to be imminent, and both prosecution and defense sources have suggested that Gotti's former lawyers, Bruce Cutler and Gerald Shargell, are themselves the subjects of grand jury scrutiny. One family untouched by these latest indictments, the Genovese family, is said to be the next one that the federal prosecutors are working hard at bringing down. Katie, Marvin?
Thank you very much, Dave. The repercussions from today's verdict are being felt in Washington as well. But Brooklyn Congressman Charles Schumer says the fight against organized crime is far from over.
Sometimes fighting organized crime is like fighting the hydra. You chop off one head and two new heads occur. So certainly the traditional Cosa Nostra has been weakened, not only by this prosecution, but by the series of prosecutions. But now there are new gangs on the horizon taking their place. You have the triads, the Asian triads, you have the Jamaican posse. All of these are on the horizon and will inevitably try to fill the vacuum that is created by John Gotti's conviction. So the fight on organized crime is sort of a never-ending war.
Schumer says the lessons learned in the Gotti trial can be used to help put away other mobsters.
Anyone who thinks
It took prosecutors 4 trials and 6 years to finally win a guilty verdict against John Gotti. Jason Carroll is standing by now in Little Italy with a look back at the case that put the Dapper Don away. Jason?
Heidi, it's quiet right now in front of the Ravenite Social Club. It was here at the club in Little Italy where John Gotti did much of his wheeling and dealing. It was his inner sanctum, a safe place. It was also the place where the FBI taped Gotti while he allegedly plotted a murder. Those tapes highlighted a lengthy and highly publicized trial that ended in today's stunning verdict. The type of trial Hollywood movies are made of. The U.S. government versus John Gotti, reputed godfather of the country's most powerful mafia family, the Gambinos. The trial was marked by dramatic testimony from Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, the star witness who turned against his former friend and alleged mob boss. The most serious charge against Gotti, he masterminded the 1985 rub-out of mob boss Paul Castellano. Gotti's right-hand man took the stand to squeal on his old boss. Gravano told jurors Gotti and co-defendant Frank Locascio plotted the assassination of Castellano. It didn't come as a shock to anyone that he was going in this direction, Gravano testified. We sent messages back and forth. We decided to whack, to get Paul. We decided we were going to do a piece of work we couldn't miss. It had to be done. We discussed who the shooters would be, what positions to take, where to meet the following day. Many Gotti associates, like these men seen here, came to court every day to hear testimony. They now call Gravano Sammy the Rat because he broke the mafia's strict code of silence. The trial also attracted a slew of stars who came to pay their respects. Movie star Mickey Rourke, TV actor John Amos, 60s recording star Jay Black, and Anthony Quinn, who lashed out at Gravano for snitching.
I was raised on the east side myself in Los Angeles, and that was the worst sin one could report.
The government called 37 witnesses during the lengthy trial, but it was Gotti's own voice that was perhaps the most damaging testimony of all. Prosecutors relied heavily on 8 hours of secret FBI recordings of Gotti. At one point, Gotti worries about going to jail and asked Gravano to head the family. The trial lasted 29 days and tempers flared as it wore on, coming to a peak when the judge threatened to remove Gotti from the courtroom after he blew a sarcastic kiss at the prosecutor. The judge also held the lawyer for co-defendant Locascio in contempt of court after the two got into a heated shouting match. For now, the shouting may be over, but the fear is not. It was fear that drove the judge to keep the jury anonymous and sequestered. Tonight, John Gotti's reign as a mafia kingpin may be over. Now we'll wait and see who will be the next person to claim the Ravenite Social Club as his inner sanctum. Reporting live from Little Italy, Jason Carroll. Now back to you.